sexy but critical position groups in the offensive tackle. We'll start that first. Did not separate from left and right, so you can feel free to differentiate why maybe you put this guy higher because left tackle is more valuable in your opinion. But nonetheless, though, if you don't mind, if you could share your top 5 tackles heading into 2023, John.
Yeah, so at number 5, I have Christian Darrisaw from the Minnesota Vikings. He's a guy that both you and I were very high on coming out of the draft. A lot of people were much more in the Rashawn Slater camp, but I think both you and I had him at number 2, right behind Penei Sewell. And he has exceeded expectations for me personally. He was utterly dominant last year with the Minnesota Vikings. And when I say utterly dominant, he was one of the highest graded offensive linemen in the NFL, period. And so he had a really strong season, and it was on full display, specifically in the run game. The guy was just a monster. He could just bully anybody any way that he wanted to. And obviously, he was still really solid in the pass game. And so just the sheer power that he was able to provide to his team, that ability then, benefiting them in the run game, I have Christian Darrisaw at number 5. At number 4, I have Laramie Tunsil from the Houston Texans. Really solid offensive lineman. Got no complaints about Laramie Tunsil. He's been there before. He's done that. He's a veteran. And finally, I guess he'll have a chance to actually protect a QB outside of, what did he play with Deshaun Watson? 1 year, maybe 2 years?
And then a bunch of years with Davis Mills.
Yeah, then the Deshaun Watson stuff happened. So, we'll see about CJ Stroud, but he's being protected by a good one in Laramie Tunsil, who I have at number 4. Next, at number 3, I have Andrew Thomas from the New York Giants. This one pains me because I don't love giving props to the other NFC East teams, but Andrew Thomas is a stud. Overall, I think that the Giants' offensive line in general looks a little bit better, specifically because of how good Andrew Thomas is. I may be a little bit biased here in this take just because I watch a lot more Giants football than I do many other teams. And so I know just more about Andrew Thomas, but I think that Daniel Jones has some of the worst pocket presence in the NFL. I've seen that guy so many times. If somebody gets beat on his backside, he's not going to feel it. He's going to get hit. And so all of a sudden, Daniel Jones is getting all this praise and everything for improving. And I think it's obviously big bolster to the coaching staff who have really changed the system. Saquon's finally healthy. But I think another part of that too is that Andrew Thomas is completely locking up that left side and preventing anything from happening on Daniel Jones' backside, which just limits a lot of the potential mistakes that Daniel Jones was making prior to Andrew Thomas being there. So I have him at number 3. At number 2, I have another NFC East offensive lineman, and that is Lane Johnson. He's a stud. The guy, when I think of who you truly want as your right tackle, I'm thinking of Lane Johnson. Not only is he great in both the pass and run game, but athletically, he's a freak. He can, when the Eagles want to do these crazy swings and these tosses to the left side or the right side, from the left side, he'll be the guy that can swing in and just go and deck somebody all the way from right tackle. And then when they're going to the right, he can become a lead blocker down the field. Lane Johnson is just, he's a stud. He's an absolute stud. And also notably, as many Eagles fans like to unfortunately make fun of the Cowboys for, the only person that I've actually ever seen successfully go one-on-one with Micah Parsons throughout an entire game. So Lane Johnson, he is a number 2 for me. And then at number 1, I don't feel like I really need to say much. It's Trent Williams. It's been Trent Williams for I don't even know, maybe when Joe Thomas was in his prime was the last tackle. And then whenever he retired or started to decline, Trent Williams became the best tackle. And it's been that way for quite a long time. Oh, well, maybe there might have been some years where Tyron Smith was a little bit better. But point being, Trent Williams has been the best tackle in the league for at least the last 3 years off the top of my head. So, and probably still is the best offensive lineman in the NFL. So Trent Williams is my number 1. I didn't necessarily really distinguish much between left or right tackle, to be honest. I just thought of who I think is the best, and that's kind of how I rated it. So, yeah.
No worries. Cool. So, yeah, I'll go with mine real quick, and then we'll talk about maybe some of the guys we left off or such. We'll just do that together. So, my top 5 tackles going into 2023, I also went Christian Darrisaw at 5. Many of the reasons you mentioned, too, like, great in pass protection. We mentioned one of the highest graded guys, but coming into the league, I felt he was going to be a very good run blocker. The question was pass pro, and he has answered that call, especially with how pass heavy the Vikings got as the season went on. He has been a key as to why Kirk Cousins and the Vikings have had this success, and especially with the crazy Justin Jefferson numbers and such. He's been a stable force at tackle for them, and then even in the run game as well. So I'm excited to see how he can improve and get better. At number 4, I went with Orlando Brown Jr. I do value the versatility. He's played right. He excelled at left too for the Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously, his size is a huge benefit for him. He is a big person, so obviously in the run game, he's a mauler just like the rest of these guys. But I think that's where he really shines. And in pass pro, he's been better in recent years, and obviously because the Chiefs trusted him there as well. So it'll be interesting to see if he can continue that success in Cincinnati. You just never know with scheme changes, and sometimes different. I mean, I would say obviously the Chiefs' offensive tackle staff and Andy Reid, former offensive coach or offensive lineman, they know how to coach guys up. So we'll see if Brown continues that or kind of falls back to where he was before, which he's a solid tackle, but maybe not top 5. But nonetheless, he got his money and deservedly so this offseason. So I have him at number 4. That number 3 is where I went with Lane Johnson of the Eagles. Like you mentioned, dude's tough as nails and a great player on top of that. I mean, half the time he's been dealing. I mean, didn't he deal with like a core injury and they delayed the run last season, I believe, and he was still kicking ass and just winning his battles on the edge there. And I'm sure if they really needed him to, he could play the left side, but they have Jordan Mailata, and Lane Johnson has been playing right for most of his career, so that's where he excels at. But nonetheless, he is a big key as to why they are so dominant in the run game and can also pass protect very well too. Obviously, as you mentioned, one of the few people that were able to hang with Micah Parsons successfully. So he's at number 3. From here on out, though, mainly left tackles. And at number 2 is where I went with Laramie Tunsil from the Houston Texans. Just a model of consistency, despite the fact that the Texans, and like you mentioned, just have been real stinky the past few years on the field. But hopefully with CJ Stroud there, and obviously I think they restructured Laramie's. I know they re-signed the right tackle, Tyus Howard, but I think they restructured his contract recently, if I remember correctly. Have their stable of tackles, and Laramie's a great one there for CJ Stroud to grow with. So great investment for the Texans, and obviously Laramie's amazing despite the whole draft day fiasco. But nonetheless, he's proven to be a great tackle, and he's been paid so for quite some time. Now we go to number 1, and no shocker here. I'll keep it short. I went with Trent Williams also. I mean, we've seen the dude's athleticism with, lining him up and as like a fullback almost and such. But even then, just at tackle as well, he's been amazing, dominant, and so key in the Kyle Shanahan run game, where they ask him to do different things in pulling or going out and just going to the second level successfully, things like that. Or in the pass game, we know he's rock solid and just amazing there as well. So yeah, and I double checked my rankings for the last few years where we did offensive lineman as a whole. And as for me, I have had Troy Williams at the top. So like you said, just been dominant for multiple years, and we expect him to be in this conversation hopefully the next few years as well. But amazing deal for the Niners. If you remember back, I think they traded a 3rd-round pick. Obviously, he was disgruntled in Washington because of the health issues and whatnot. And obviously, Washington was a mess. But he has been a great investment for the Niners because, obviously, been a cornerstone of their offensive line, especially since they've been losing a couple of pieces in recent years. But that is my top 5. So obviously you left off Orlando, and I left off Andrew Thomas. I'll start with why I left him off. He was right there, like 6, 7, 8. It's just really tough, and I felt like maybe a little bit of like the system helped Thomas a bit. Quick passes and the run game, but I have no arguments with him at 3 for you. And only other person you mentioned, Slater. Slater missed my top, just injuries. Hopefully he can stay healthy. And I'm trying to think of any other tackles I missed. Was there anyone that you missed that was on the outside looking in?
Tristan Wirfs from the Buccaneers was someone that I really considered. He was kind of the main one that I really thought about that I left off. I did think about Orlando Brown Jr. as well. Just personally last year, I didn't feel like he had as strong a year as the guys that I put up there. But he was also certainly in consideration. There was maybe a couple other names like Mailata or Ryan Ramczyk or some of those guys, but they weren't really as strong of contenders as I would say. Yeah, like the 2 for me were that I really considered were Orlando and Wirfs.
Yeah, and then also I want to throw in, if hopefully Staley can get back, Ronnie Staley of the Ravens can get back to being healthy. He's been dealing, coming off the ACL injury he got a couple of years ago. Last year he was still kind of finding his footing, but obviously we know he's been in here a couple of times, at least in mine, top 5, and I'm sure in yours as well. So hopefully he can get back to healthy. He could definitely be right back here in this conversation this year with the Ravens. So those are our top 5 tackles heading into 2023.